Hello, happiness abounder, and welcome back. So, yesterday we highlighted how discomfort is really fear in disguise, and I went kind of a next level on why we should have declarations to help bring us into alignment during fearful situations. But here's the thing, I think that works when we're talking very quick, rapid situation stuff, going, oh, identify very quickly, figure out that I'm really uncomfortable here. Why am I uncomfortable? Is it a situation I need to leave? Or is it I'm uncomfortable because I'm afraid of something that's not the most rational? Use my declaration to move forward. But what if it's something a little bit more long term? Or you're feeling uncomfortable and some of that anxiety around a situation that's going to be coming up. Then what do you do? So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how we can write out our uncomfortable and our fear feelings so that we can move into our best selves. So what does that even really look like? So first and foremost, I think you probably have heard this before, but people always say, well, what's the worst that could happen? Here's the thing. When you ask that to yourself in your head, what's the worst that could happen? Your brain goes, we will die. That's the worst that can happen because your brain is like, it's uncomfortable. That means it's not safe. We need to be deeply afraid of this and not do it. Now, there's a couple situations that this could be, right? Maybe in your religious community, you've been asked to speak. And you kind of felt like you had to say yes. But now it's coming up and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to speak in front of all these people. Public speaking is in the top 10 of human fears across the world. And I'm going to get up there and everyone is going to judge me and I'm going to make a mistake and I'm going to die. How many people has that happened to, right? Or maybe it's, and I don't have this issue so much anymore, but I used to. You have a family function coming up with your in-laws and you're nervous about it. You're worried about it. You're worried about how you're going to be perceived and all this stuff. And you're keeping it in your head and you're really uncomfortable and you're really scared. And your brain's like, oh no, we're going to die. And I know that sounds like super exaggerated, but here's the thing. When you keep it in your head, it moves to that exaggeration level. You may not straight up say to yourself, I'm going to die, but your brain subconsciously is saying that. We're uncomfortable. This is really scary. And I'm not going to get rational about it. We're going to keep you from dying, so we're not going to go do that. Now, in both of those examples, those are things you kind of already committed to. So it's really hard to not do it. But maybe you can get out of it. Maybe you get sick. Like, physical manifestation of that fear and that discomfort? I don't know. But I do know that whatever the situation is, if it's more in that longer term scope, so whatever that situation is or however you are feeling uncomfortable about it, there's a technique that I want to share with you about writing it out. Because again, when it's in your head, the worst that can happen feels very real. And it can go off the rails very quickly. Because your brain is meant to keep you safe. So how do we combat that? Yes, ask what's the worst that can happen, but write it on paper. What's the worst that can happen on the top of the page? I'm feeling fearful because. I'm uncomfortable because. And you just write out everything your brain tells you. And now, suddenly it's out of your head. It has some semblance of organization, which our brains love. Even if you're not an organized person, if you clean let's say you cleaned your room, any room, and you're like, I'm not a clean person, I'm not an organized person, but you've just like tidied up even, like an office area. Don't you feel better? Some of you rebels out there like, no, I don't feel better. And that's okay too, but our brains have a tendency to love organization. So when we can take all that chaotic and complex fear and thoughts and discomfort and put them in an organized fashion, it doesn't have to be columns, pros, cons, all these things, just putting it out on paper with something on top, a header, saying, the worst that could happen is, and then writing it out gets it out of you, gets it organized, and helps you get rational about that fear. So if we use the giving a speech or talking to your religious community, what's the worst that can happen? So I stumble and I say a lot. I lose my notes or they fall all over the place. That's the worst that can happen? That's not too terrible. Really, in the grand scheme of things. Yes, it's like, oh my gosh, people are going to think I'm so scattered or flaky or whatever it is, but really, maybe they just slipped. And people will come and help you. People will be happy and proud of you for stepping up and being like, okay, wow, I just dropped my notes. But that said, here, give me a few seconds to compile them, and then I'll be ready to speak with you. That's okay. You do not have to be perfect. But here's the thing, that's the worst that could happen. Maybe you think that the worst thing that could happen is that you stumble and you let out a curse word that may or may not be acceptable, depending on your religious community, or any community really. And you're like, oh no, they're gonna like kick me out of the community. Chances are they're not, right? Not for something like that. And if they were to, you would still be alive. You would still have every single day to make changes, to make choices, to move forward or backwards in your life. So the worst case scenario that you think to yourself, even subconsciously, is I'm going to die. But really the worst case scenario is that you tend to keep on living because you gave a speech to your community. And maybe it didn't go the way you wanted it to. Maybe it did. If it didn't, how can you learn and grow for the next time to continue to push yourself out of your comfort zone? Right? But the first step of that is asking yourself, what's the worst that can happen? But not asking in your brain, but putting it out on paper. Now, the next level of that, if you are racked with anxiety and it's so hard to be able to think and see what you need to do to move forward, then I highly recommend creating what I call an after story. This episode's all about writing it out. So after you've written out what's the worst that can happen, a couple of other things on that, you're actually going to take that piece of paper, rip it up, and throw it away. It's not meant to be seen by anyone else. It's not meant to be held on to. It's meant to get it out, be like, that's ridiculous. Rip it up, throw it away. Okay, so the next step is our brain goes, okay, now we don't really know what's going to happen. And that's scary and uncomfortable. So what you do is you write an after story. And you write what's going to happen in that situation you are afraid of in a positive way. Now, don't write out 10 positive scenarios. Write out one. So that your brain goes, oh, that's what's going to happen. We can move into this calmly. Now, whether that happens or not isn't the point. The point is that you're able to work through that discomfort, that anxiety, and that fear to move to those next levels up, so that you can be your best self. So I'm going to leave you with that today. I hope that it's a great complement to yesterday's episode all about declarations and really can help you see a couple of actionable tips on how to work through your discomfort to move through to your best life. So that said, have a wonderful day. Be sure to write out what's the worst that could happen and write out your after story. And above everything else, remember, you are capable of happiness abound.